Hello, welcome everybody to Willow Legal Group's coffee chat. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So today we are talking with Annie Hirsch and Rebecca Cosca, and they are the founders of Hirsch and Cosca. They were founded in 2015, and they bring decades of legal experience to personal injury law. They are award-winning, dedicated advocates who fight to hold the negligent accountable and protect your future. From car, truck, boat accidents to animal attacks to medical malpractice and nursing home negligence, Annie and Rebecca have recovered millions on behalf of their clients. Free consultations and no fee on injury claims unless they win. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the things we wanted to talk to you guys today about was insurance. And I know in the PI world, you guys probably get to work with a lot of insurance companies, and you probably know more about insurance than some insurance agents do. So tell us.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm sure you do.
So tell us what we need to know about insurance, and specifically, I guess, auto insurance.
I mean, first, I think we should just be upfront and say we have no skin in the game. We make nothing off of this. We don't sell. Our spouses don't sell insurance. We are doing this purely so people have the information because it helps them later on. So we are not insurance sales reps, nor do we benefit from getting people to buy more of it. It's a worthwhile.
Spoken like a true attorney.
That's right. That's right.
Always have to have one. And I think, we were chatting a little bit before the call, but I think a lot of people think of insurance as something to cover them if something happens, little, big. And I always like to think when I'm buying insurance, I'm planning for my worst day, not my so-so day. So if the worst were to happen, how do I make sure my coverage is there? A lot of people kind of look at it, well, if I get into a little fender bender or a little something happens. And I think that's the first most important thing to sort of look at, which is always think of what the worst outcome could be and what do you need there to protect you. And then the second thing, and I can surely let Rebecca get into it a little bit as well, is that specifically with auto insurance, when you get auto insurance, and a lot of people say, well, Maryland has a 30-60 minimum, which means that if you get in a collision, that you have to have at least $30,000 to cover if you hit somebody else and it's your fault, to cover their bodily injury claim. And or if there's more than one person in it, $60,000 total. And I think a lot of people get that thinking they don't want to pay a lot for insurance and they don't want to have to pay a lot in case there's a claim. And what a lot of people don't realize is whatever that policy is that you get that covers if you're at fault, that's also the policy that covers you if you get hit and say the person that hits you doesn't have enough coverage, they carry a 30-60, or if you get hit in a hit and run. So in the event of those situations, if you get catastrophically injured, you only have $30,000 that can cover you, as opposed to if you carry $1 million or $500,000, and let's say you work for yourself and you're going to go without salary for a while because you can't work and the medical bills are mounting up, et cetera, and you've got huge copays. So whatever, the idea of being in Maryland, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So people look at, I don't want to pay a lot. And the difference in paying for, say, 30-60 versus more to significantly cover yourself is not a lot in premiums, but it makes a huge difference when you're the person that's injured and that other person carries 30-60, or alternatively, it's a hit and run and there's no coverage on the other side, because step 2 is to follow an uninsured, underinsured motorist claim with your policy, because that's what that is there for as well.
And that's what I said, and I get it. Lower premiums are great. I just added a 16-year-old male to my auto insurance policy, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. But the fact of the matter is, if he goes out and he gets in an accident, I want to make sure we have enough coverage. And so many people, and especially today with the internet, a lot of insurance can be bought online. So people aren't going through a broker. They're not talking to a person. They're just clicking on it. They go, okay, well, 30-60, that's the minimum in Maryland. They click on it and they go, great. I've got this coverage. The problem is they get in an accident. All of a sudden, the other person only has $30,000 in coverage and they have $30,000 in medical bills. Well, it doesn't take long to add up to 30,000 in medical bills. A broken ankle could do that, And so, and they go, well, but now I can't work. Well, there's no money left. The insurance company is going to write you a check for 30,000 and that's it. So if you don't have additional coverage, which is your uninsured or underinsured coverage, that's it. You're going to get your $30,000 check and they're going to say, good luck to you. Have a good life. And there's no additional money coming for you. So if you have a $100,000 policy, we can then go to your insurance and go, look, we got hit by this guy who had a minimal policy, $30,000. But we have $30,000 in bills, and we also have lost wages, and we had a rental car, and we have pain and suffering, and we have these other things. And we think that this, the payout on this claim should have been $100,000. Well, if you have $100,000 in coverage, we can go after that. But if all you have is the minimal 30,000 coverage also, there's nothing left. You can't even go after that 30,000 unless you've specifically told your insurance company you want what's called a stacking policy, which almost nobody in Maryland has because you have to request it. It's not the default. So
I know about that.
Right. Sometimes people, they get injured and the other person is 30 and they're like, not enough. And we go, I agree. But your insurance coverage is also 30. And so there isn't anything else for us to go get for you. And so that's why it becomes important to have more coverage, not less. And even though you don't like paying those premiums, nobody does. I'm going to have to add another teenager next year. I am not looking forward to what these premiums are going to look like, but I'm still going to keep my $500,000 policy because if I get injured, I want my lost wages paid for. I don't want to lose my house because I couldn't make the mortgage payment because I didn't have money coming in. So, and like Annie said, the difference between a $30,000 policy and a $100,000 policy usually isn't a lot. It's money, and all insurance is expensive, but compared to the benefit that you're receiving, it's usually worth it.
Yeah. Talking about teenagers specifically, and I tell this story in a lot of different arenas, but I have a client whose teenager was involved in an accident and the other driver, unfortunately, was killed. Mm-hmm. And they had an umbrella policy. And so the widow of the other driver opted to take that, that $1 million payout rather than sue them for everything they had.
Right.
And so we are also big advocates of insurance in general, different types for different reasons, but it is for that worst day. But talk to me a little bit, or talk to us a little bit about liability of your teenage children and in the PI world, because I do get that question a lot, and I don't remember from law school.
That's okay. Do you want to start, Annie?
Oh, I was going to ask if you wanted to start.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I mean, and so if you mean liability for them driving or liability for them in general?
I think in general, because yes, driving is probably the biggest thing, but like teenagers tend to do stupid things. And what as parents, might we be responsible for, and what might be a good reason to have insurance to help cover that?
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of always having a big umbrella policy. If you have something to protect, you need to protect it. And the way you protect it with your insurance. Luckily, we're not responsible for a lot of what our teenagers do.
Good.
And that's good because we do stupid stuff. And we do our best as parents to keep them from doing that stupid stuff. But you can't be on a teenager 24/7. And if you have more than one teenager, forget about it. So that's, but so with cars, we are liable. One of the reasons we're liable is because generally we are the purchaser of the car. We are the purchaser of the insurance. And so that's one of the reasons that the liability transfers onto us, is because we are basically by, any teenager under 18, we sign before they get their license. So for instance, my son couldn't get a license if he didn't have a parent to sign and say it's okay for him to get a license. Otherwise, he has to wait till he's 18. And so that, comes into, not to go back to law school, but it comes into contracts and can we contract with teenagers and all that. Now if your teenager does property damage, for instance, somebody's house, you could get sued for that. But it's going to have to go through some of the same processes, and they might sue your teenager, but your teenager may have no assets. And so a lot of times it's hard to actually, you might get a judgment against your teenager, but they might have trouble collecting on assets. And so generally, for the most part, we're not responsible for much of our teenagers' behavior that they do outside. But in cars, we absolutely are. And that's because we are signing the insurance. Now, if your teen is 18 and bought their own car and pays for their own insurance, guess what? They can't come after your house when your teen gets in trouble. But when my teen is on my insurance driving my car, they absolutely, if I had a $30,000 policy and my teenager caused catastrophic damages, they absolutely could sue me, come after my house, my personal assets. And that's why it's important to then have that umbrella policy to kick in if you can. But often umbrella policies specifically exclude auto, which is why it is important to have that underinsured, uninsured motor vehicle policy high, because if you don't have that, the umbrella policy generally will not cover. If you haven't taken the time to put that auto policy in, they're not going to give extra on the umbrella policy.
And just to hop on the back of that, also remember that insurance only covers negligent acts. So if your teen goes out and vandalizes, those are intentional. So generally getting into any sort of intentional act, that sort of puts insurance out of the story to begin with. And also, again, with umbrella policies will protect your assets. If there's an overage, it does nothing for you, though, if you get hit by somebody and they don't have coverage. So there's nothing usually when you sign up for auto insurance that says, okay, here's your liability policy if you're at fault. Here's the UM or UIM, uninsured, underinsured policy. There's fine print language in there that basically says this right here, this liability policy that you're agreeing, if you hurt someone, this is the coverage that you've got. That's what's going to cover you if you get hit in a hit and run. And that's it. And most people ignore that fine print language. And
yeah. And that goes back to what you're saying, though. Like,
the umbrella person. Sorry, the umbrella would cover your assets, but that's like Annie was saying, if you were injured, it would not cover uninsured medical bills.
Yeah. Right. But no, that's what you were like, the importance of working with a person, not just doing things online, because a good insurance person, broker, agent is going to explain that to you.
Correct.
And listening to them, because I do talk to agents who say, I tell people all day, every day, and they insist, no, I'm fine. I've got health insurance, et cetera, I'm fine if I get hurt. And the thing that people don't think about is, yes, you've got health insurance to cover the bills. But one, there is such a thing as accountability, which when you are wrongfully injured by somebody else, all of a sudden you do have a certain feeling of injustice and wanting that person to be accountable and a level of frustration, right? Because it's going on your health insurance and you're paying the copays. And then two, above and beyond health insurance, there's other expenses. There's lost wages and there's pain and suffering. And that is real. I know a lot of people like to poo-poo it. But when you go to PT for 6 months or a year, the first time you hurt your back in life, you realize pain and suffering is a real thing. It really gets in the way of things. So, going to those doctor's appointments, not being at work, not having PTO and having those things infringed, not being able to do stuff with your kids, it adds up and it's a heavy burden, even in the smaller cases. And so people forget about that. And those 30/60 policies are just not enough to cover things. And also when she was talking about, going after your policy, that's why we have insurance. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing bad about contacting your insurance company after you've exhausted the other side and saying, now I'm going to make a claim for this much because my bills were this much. My pain and suffering was this much, et cetera, et cetera. We help do that. Obviously, it's not a straight formula, but there's nothing bad. That's why we have insurance, right? We pay these premiums so that if the worst happens, we have coverage to try to cushion the blow overall. So I just wanted to put that out there because it sort of has this negative connotation of, I don't want to use it. Well, then why are we paying premiums for it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're paying for it. Like, use it.
And I always say, even, when Annie talks about copays and stuff, so even assuming that you have health insurance, if you get hurt in an accident, let's say it's a minor accident and you need maybe 6 weeks of physical therapy. But when you really sit down and start to add that up, if you have a $40 copay and you're going to physical therapy 3 days a week, I mean, you're talking $600 in copays just for your $600 a month in copays just for physical therapy. And that doesn't include any doctors or orthopedics or x-rays that you might need. And so even all of that stuff starts to really add up, even when you have the health insurance. And so, and that's another aspect that we can talk about, either today or on another day, but the importance of using your health insurance, even if you're in an auto accident, because a lot of people think that they shouldn't do that. And in Maryland, specifically, you're allowed to pick which health insurance will be primary in an auto accident. And I always advise people to use their health insurance. And the reason for that is because while the health insurance can assert a lien against you for any amounts they paid, the lien is only for amounts they paid, which is always lower than the original doctor's bill. Because health insurance has contracted amounts. They've already gone in. They've argued that, look, your $100 bill isn't reasonable. We're only going to pay you $75 on that. Well, $75 is all they can collect. And guess what? I'm going to tell them, hey, your $75 isn't reasonable. I'm only going to pay you $50 on that. And I'm going to try and get that lien reduced even further. And any money that gets reduced is money straight in people's pockets. So I always say, use health insurance first. Let the health insurance pay, and then we'll pay that lien back, but it's still going to end up with more money in your pocket doing it that way than if you just wait and let the auto insurance pay for everything straight up.
And to sort of clarify that, the whole idea of the lien is that the insurance company paid these medical bills, but those bills were incurred because somebody made a mistake. So they have a vested interest. So again, if you only have $30,000 there, right, and they do have a lien, even if we negotiate that lien, they're going to recover a certain percentage of it. We had somebody with a broken ankle or broken leg, and they had a lot of bills, and the health insurance company was placing a lien, and it far exceeded the amount of coverage, and she had no uninsured, underinsured coverage left because she had 30/60 as well. And so she was really stuck in a pickle between balances and liens, et cetera, to try to get anything, and she was out of work.
Yeah. So
I love insurance.
moral of the story, get insurance. Get more insurance than the minimum.
Yeah.
Right?
Lots of it. Just get lots of it. Listen to the agent when they're talking to you.
And I would say work with a broker whenever you have the opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys probably know some brokers that you could recommend that you actually like if people needed recommendations. And we have some that we like. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you get what you pay for. There are some policies and companies that are a little more, but they also are much more reasonable when it comes to negotiating when there's a claim. We see a huge difference. We won't get into who here, obviously, between policies. And
we're not doing any defamation on this podcast, but call us in person. We might talk.
And to that same end, when they mention PIP coverage, which is personal injury protection, which usually costs around $50 a year, people want to pinch and save wherever they can. And again, we get it, especially in today's day and age. But it's usually a $2,500 or a $5,000 gimme. It's a no fault, no matter who's at fault, you get that, and you can submit your medical bills or et cetera to get that recovery. People waive that because they don't want to pay the $50 a year for it all the time.
I'm going to call my insurance agent. See if I have PIP.
Never waive it. I think I have a $10,000 PIP card.
I think Annie likes insurance even more than I do. I think Annie has 10,000 on hers and I have 5,000 on mine. But same thing. The sort of default rate in Maryland is $2,500. And as personal injury attorneys, we both have upped that. So I have 5,000, Annie has 10, because we both understand that's money that you can access quickly to pay co-pays or lost wages. It's a no fault. So even if at some point they find that you were at fault, that's still money that you have access to for those bills. So I highly recommend not waiving PIP and in fact asking them to double it, or in Annie's case, quadruple it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Actually. So go ahead.
So I think we'll start with our last question. because we've covered the other ones.
Yeah, we have.
So what's the one item you couldn't live without in your day-to-day life?
Day to day, Annie.
I mean, my vehicle. All I do is travel. I go to sports fields. I go to work. I go back to the sports fields. I mean, all I do is bop around to my kids' practices. So I would be up the creek without a paddle, around here without it. I would say that right now, because all I do is live on lacrosse, soccer fields, football fields.
Jeez. Sounds like a lot of fun.
I'm going to say my cell phone, because my cell phone is my lifeline to everything these days. I can grocery shop, order stuff for my kids, find out where my kids are, find out what they're doing to some extent, and just keep in touch. And I can, do so much. And so to me, it's sort of my lifeline. So I got to say, but if the Wi-Fi goes out, like in an apocalypse, it's not even going to be the top of my list. So, but as long as, we're in normal times, I would stick with my cell phone, if I'm stranded on a desert island, I would pick something different.
Fair, totally fair. So.
Awesome. Well, this was really great. Thank you guys for joining us. We really learned a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm going to go text my insurance agent when we're done.
Thank you for having us. Anytime.
And we'll drop Annie and Rebecca's contact information in the comments if you want to reach out and connect with them. You can find their information in the comments.
Yep.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks, ladies.